Welcome to APPA's Facility Symposium and today's session is titled FPI 2.0, a new spin on your data. My name is Billy Zidek, Standards and Codes Administrator at APPA.
Billy and Christina and one other guy.
Oh.
So, no, I'm not.
I'm going to turn it over to our speakers in a minute, but before we get started, I want to cover some housekeeping basics and the flow of the content today. We'll be recording the session and posting the recording after the event concludes. All attendees are in listen-only mode, and as such, we will be using the chat feature throughout the program unless your presenter calls for open mic. We do ask that you be mindful to ensure your mic is on mute when you are not speaking in order to minimize interruptions. Please use the chat box function to enter questions you may have. We will be monitoring the chat box throughout the presentation and will have time to address your questions at various moments during the session. If at any time you experience technical issues with virtual or audio, please also use the chat feature to bring that to our attention. It is now my pleasure to welcome Christina Hills, Director of Credentialing and Benchmarking at APPA, and Ted Widener, Associate Professor at Purdue University. Christina, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Billy. And I'm gonna turn it over to Ted. I'll be back later.
All right. So the goal of this session is to present to the attendees the basics about FPI and how FPI has been used in the past and how we have how Christina has modified it to make it better. We'll look at some traditional uses of FPI because it's been around for a while. We'll talk about questions that you should be asking both on your campus and from the FPI data. We'll talk about 3 improvement paths where you can use FPI data and you can make things better for your organization. I'll talk about potential goals of those paths and give an example, and then we'll open it up for general discussion. So first, FPI basics. A lot of folks have avoided using the FPI because they perceive there are a number of barriers. The questions may seem overwhelming. When you've put in all of your data answering those questions, then the challenge becomes what to do with the data. Because again, there's a lot of data from a lot of institutions. And lastly, there are some concerns about the credibility of the data. And this comes in part because there's no one individual who gathers the data. Different people for different universities and sometimes several people at each university put the data in. And so the question is, are we really comparing apples to apples when I'm comparing my institution to some other one? And we'll talk about how to get around some of those problems. So first of all, FPI has become a little bit more streamlined. There's now only 136 questions. The former abbreviated version had over 170 questions, and the detailed version had many, many more questions. So it was an overwhelming problem, but now it's been streamlined and we've focused in the questions to those things that are become more important to folks. There are a lot of ways to filter and sort the data. You can look at information about your organization. You can compare your organization with different metrics on the campus, as in the number of students or the gross square footage of the campus, or you can look at something like the amount of classroom space on your campus compared to everything else. There are a lot of flexible presentation parameters available. While there is a standard report format that's available to give to executives, there are still a number of other potential presentation methods that you can use. And the great thing about the FPI is that it has almost 20 years of data in it. So it's a very rich source of data, particularly if you have been one of those people putting in data for almost 20 years. Alternatively, with some assistance, you can do what I do, which is to study all of that data and see how things are changing over time. But the real question becomes, why do we even bother measuring what's going on? Well, Albert Einstein said, not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. And a lot of folks in facilities would make that argument that, well, we have a lot of intangible things that we do, and so why do we even bother counting? Let's just keep doing the things where we get some intangible benefits. But the problem is, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And the FPI is a great tool to help you know where you're going and what road to take. In the facilities business, we have all kinds of tools to measure different things. And the FPI is just one more tool that we can take advantage of to measure what's going on in our facility. Many of you, in fact, I'd have a hard time believing that any of you don't have some kind of computerized maintenance management system or an integrated work management system. This software is used to track work that's performed, and sometimes it looks at specific components. So sophisticated users will have component information, component maintenance history, and they'll know how much they've spent taking care of a building, an individual part of a building, a system within a building, and they'll use it for decision points, particularly if they apply it to something like the total cost of ownership. You may also take advantage of a CMMS to track the work, track employees and their work, have it integrated with the payroll system, or even use the performance recorded in the CMMS to evaluate your employees, to see how they're performing and to keep a good record. Sophisticated implementations of a facilities management system or CMMS include the component history, as I mentioned, maintaining your maintenance materials inventory, providing for preventive maintenance steps, maybe even utilizing predictive or reliability-based maintenance processes, integrating with your building management system so you know if a fan is not operating as it's supposed to, maybe it's hooked in with a CMMS and you get a warning flag or an automatic work order is generated, and a number of other things. So it's a very powerful tool. So we already measure a lot of stuff in facilities management. So let's take advantage of that information. The APPA FPI is a great way to keep track of major and some minor characteristics about your campus, your entire campus. The financial information that you have, the staffing information, and physical information about the condition of the campus overall. And it takes advantage of important ratios and helps provide you with a sense of current and potentially future conditions on the campus. FPI doesn't do your job, however. It cannot solve your campus condition, any growth plans, or any service levels. That's your job. You have to take advantage of the information the FPI provides and make your own decisions. and it can't answer questions about individual buildings or systems just because it doesn't get down to that level of detail. If it did, you'd be putting in thousands of pieces of information rather than 136. But the great thing about the FPI is that it helps you know yourself. You need to know your Carnegie class. Are you an associate, baccalaureate, master's, research institution, uh, that sort of thing? Who are your peers? You can measure your peers against folks in your area, your APPA region, by your Carnegie class, or a couple other choices. What's your overall environment? Who are you serving? Where are you located? Are you in an urban location, in a suburb, or in a more rural location? What's your overall history? How old are your buildings? What condition are they in? What's your overall mission? What kind of institution are you? Are you focused on training physicians, or are you more on delivering services for the local community? And then what are your overall goals, and tying that in with the institutional goals? So let's look at a couple comparison characteristics that exist in the FPI. There's a clear mission that you may have, and it'll tell you you will input or take advantage of information that you know about the kind of institution you are, whether you're large or small, or an enormous institution. What's your site, and then what's the overall character that you're trying to maintain on your campus. Some campuses are very formal and tightly controlled, and others are a little bit more relaxed. The other thing that we have to do is we have to know what we want to measure and answer three essential questions. The first thing is, who's going to be using the data? Are we using the data to make regular facilities decisions? Are we using them for planning purposes, or something else? So that means we have to understand the problem that we're trying to answer. The second one is, what data will be collected and how? The FPI specifies specific data that is gathered and collected, and it helps us define our solution. And then lastly, how will the data be maintained? With the FPI, APPA maintains the data. With your CMMS or IWMS, you're maintaining the data locally or in the cloud through the service that you get. The goal is to ensure that the data has integrity to it, there's confidence in it, and you can use it both in the present and in the future, and know that it's valuable and reasonable data. The other thing that we need to do is measure our performance overall, and the FPI allows us to do this in a number of different ways. Initially, the FPI, which grew out of APPA's comparative cost and staffing survey, was really looking at measuring facilities against your peers. And so you might say, well, my university is competing against some other university XYZ, and we're trying to be better on our cost per square foot. Well, that's nice, but it's only doing a comparison, and it's not very powerful when you use it that way. So sophisticated users started to see that there's a second generation which would allow us to maximize the resources that we commit to sustaining the facilities portfolio. So are we making wise expenditures with the resources we're providing to support the facility and to support the people that are working in the facilities? Are we adding value to the overall organization? And that's getting more and more important every day. But the third generation, people who are really pushing the boundaries of using FPI and performing their job, are working to get a seat at the table and move to the third generation, where can we make better operating decisions with our facility data, and indeed, can we make better strategic decisions with our facility data so that we're moving the direction that makes the university or the college stronger and more resilient. Let's go back and look at some different examples of the different generations and the solutions. So basic comparison targets were something like cost per square foot or cost per student FTE, or maybe you were looking at the facility condition index, or you're potentially looking at the cost per gross square foot to heat and cool the campus and provide lighting. Well, that's easy to do, and there were some simple charts that can be generated, and we'll look at a number of them. Here we're looking at the annual facility operating expenditure, that's AFOE, and you'll see that frequently, against the total area of the campus, the gross square feet. And there's a number of Carnegie class ranks, and you'll see that the special category, which may be a special research facility or a hospital, is very expensive to operate, and that's somewhat intuitively obvious. So this is a rather simple chart, and we can learn a little bit more looking at different things. The new FPI has a number of different ways of looking at the same data. So this is the same data, same information, but it's displayed a little bit differently. And it's organized in a logarithmic scale in this version, but you can get linear scales, logarithmic scales, and so on. This is what's called a box and whisker plot scale. We might also want to look at how much we're spending on utilities. PU is purchased utilities, and it's per gross square foot. So what are we spending annually to provide utility services to the campus? And we can see here, there's some institutions, very high research institutions, spend a great deal of money per square foot. Spread out over the entire campus, it's a big number, but there may be individual buildings where you're spending far more compared to a smaller building or a building that's less energy intensive. So there's a variety of things that we can figure out here, and there's ways that we'll see later on where the display software allows us to filter out different factors, and you can see more information that may be useful for your facility. And again, here's another thing, the same data, but displayed a little bit differently. Again, we'll look at different ways of filtering out the data and finding interesting things from this information. But let's start talking about delivering improved value to your campus. You may be interested in value compared to customer satisfaction. So your driver may be your customer satisfaction on campus, and you want to use the resources you have, your annual facility operating expenditures, as efficiently as possible. Another way of doing it, if you're more long-term approached, and that would be to look at the facility condition index over time and how much you're spending to maintain your campus versus the condition that it's in. A number of us have facilities that are in much older shape and poorer shape as a result, and maybe we realize that we're spending a lot of money just to take care of them. So here's one example looking at customer satisfaction and the amount of money that we spend per square foot. There's some interesting things we can see here. To some extent, it doesn't matter how much you spend on your campus. you can have dissatisfied people or extremely satisfied people, and it happens throughout the whole nation. One of the more interesting things that I note in here is that this campus here, and I think I know who that is, and it's really something to do with the leadership. They're spending very little, and yet they've got an extremely satisfied campus compared to an organization over here. I I wouldn't dare mention who that might be because it'd be embarrassing. And they're spending an awful lot of money, maybe almost 6 times more, and their customers are very dissatisfied. So this may give you a good sense of where you are and maybe give you some ideas of where you want to go to validate your value to the university. Another way of looking at the campus is looking at the campus condition or the facility condition index versus the amount of money you're spending. And if we think about one of our great thinkers who is passed now, Harvey Kaiser, he looked at how much we should be spending to renew the campus versus how much we spend annually to maintain it. And he had theorized a hyperbolic curve that went sort of like this. And interestingly enough, the data here seems to suggest that there's some sort of relationship between the condition of the campus and the amount of money that we're spending. But what we really want to do, if you're going to take good advantage of the FCI, is to move to the third generation and make better decisions about what to do with your campus and how to take care of it. And that means we have to develop some goals. We need to evaluate where we are relative to our performance, and then maybe make some modifications, some improvements. This is the overall plan, do, check, act, where we're using the FPI as part of our check to recognize how well we are doing. Normal benchmarking requires tools, and the FPI provides those. And some simple FPI ratios include the AFOE, Annual Facilities Operating Expenditures. We may look at the gross institutional expenditures. That's how much the university spends every year to do everything, the educational mission, maintaining facilities, and any other service obligations the university has. We also keep track of the current replacement value. It's helpful if you know your campus current replacement value, but the FCI has a way to come up with a reasonable estimate. And that's very important because well over 90% of the institutions in the United States have a lot more money invested in their facilities in current replacement value than they have in the endowment that supports the educational mission. So it's an important thing to keep track of. We also can keep track of customer surveys and energy consumption. And as we get more and more focused on green energy and being more sustainable, our energy consumption is becoming a much more important metric to keep an eye on. So let's say you might want to track something like the annual facilities expenditure versus the student enrollment. Well, what does this really mean? Essentially, if a student is paying tuition, some portion of the student's tuition is going to maintaining the facilities. Well, you've got these institutions out here, very research, very high and very large institutions with over 50,000 students, and it's pretty cheap. The student tuition dollar goes pretty darn far, as opposed to this organization over here, which has very few students, expensive to operate, and a student attending that institution is spending well over $10,000 just to have the facilities. Well, if it's a specialized facility, maybe that makes sense. But our goal here is really to move between the generations. And so I want to try to convince you to move from just comparing yourself to the university down the street to where you're comparing against yourself in a continuous improvement cycle. So the most important thing you need to do is to uh, ask these major questions. You need to know what your campus vision and mission is. Every university should have some kind of mission and vision. If you don't know what they are, I certainly hope your boss knows, or someone further up in the chain. The next thing you need to do is get familiar with the university's strategic plan. This is something that every university should have, and they probably update it every 5 to 10 years and have the Board of Trustees or the Board of Governors approve the strategic plan. And you want to be aligned with that. In order to be aligned with the vision and mission and the overall strategic plan, you have to identify your own set of goals and objectives for the facilities management organization. You have to identify some performance metrics or key performance indicators, which may be some of the measures in the FPI. You want to start off with an initial set of baseline measurements and set targets based on the overall objectives of the facilities management organization and with the objectives of the institution. And then you want to develop an action plan to move toward your targets. That's maybe called a strategic plan, maybe you're calling it an operational plan. But overall, you need to know who's going to help you get there, what are you going to measure, how are you going to do it, and when is it going to be accomplished? Everybody has a responsibility on it to execute the strategic plan. And APPA's FPI tools will help you achieve that and help you document how you are actually succeeding at your strategic plan. So let's look at it in a little bit more detail. Overall, we want to develop some goals, and that means alignment of the facility services mission with that of the university's mission. So we need to understand the mission. Maybe we do that through interviews or discussions with campus leadership, and we create a plan that may focus on the overall sustainability of the institution. You might focus on environmental sustainability. You might focus on something else. You identify what behaviors you're trying to create and get positive occupant experiences. That's your customer service goals, or the goals that help you achieve the overall objectives of the institution. You want to then create a plan to obtain or to achieve reliable service delivery. You want to meet the goals that you have promised. And you want to maintain a clear record of what's going on and how you're getting there. When will you get to delivering everything that you've promised? One example might be to be a little bit like FedEx, or even nowadays Amazon.com, where you say, this is when you're going to receive your goods. This is when the work is going to be done. You need to identify some set of goals that you can use to promise and ensure delivery. And then you want to deliver those services to the occupants and deliver services that the occupants want. Every university may have a standard set of deliverables that they have, but you may have occupants that want to customize them, that want to do things a little bit differently. That can be achieved with something like a service level agreement, where you may agree to make modifications. Maybe they'll pay you more money to deliver better service. I know of some business and law schools that they've got the resources and they tell the facilities organization, we want you to spend an extra $10,000 per building or something like that. on us so that we have more frequent custodial service than they get over in the liberal arts college. Okay, you ought to be able to do that, and you can measure it and track what's going on. These are ways of aligning your mission with the institution, identifying how you're going to do it, and delivering on your plan. So some of the metrics that we might use that can be found in the FPI might be ones that will help us create a more sustainable campus. So we can look at the energy consumption per gross square foot on campus. And that makes a great deal of sense because energy is consumed by the buildings, but it's also consumed by the occupants. And so you may want to track energy consumed by student. And then you want to keep track of where your energy is coming from. Right now, the FPI allows you to, or has allowed you to input things like tons of coal, amount of fuel oil, natural gas consumption, if you're using wood, or electricity for your primary energy sources. And we'll probably need to start keeping track of renewable sources such as wind power, solar, and so on. And then you want to look at other things such as the overall facility condition index, the average age of your buildings. When was the last time your building saw a major renovation and had its age reset? Maybe not back to zero, but something much lower than, let's say, the 50-year planned life of the building. What's the needs index of the campus? What renovations are needed in order to continue to meet the customer needs or the occupant needs of the campus? And then what's your customer rating? How are you measuring your satisfaction of customers with custodial services, with building maintenance, with landscape, and the overall condition of the campus? The FPI helps us keep track of these things. So again, looking at the campus condition and how much is spent to maintain the campus. What can we do? Well, maybe we want to set a goal of lowering our facility condition index. Clearly, that's going to require a lot of money input, but maybe we can show if we lower our facility condition index, let's say from 0.3 or 30%, in general, we will spend less per square foot to operate and maintain the campus than we would if we had a facility condition index that was a lot higher. Alternatively, you may say, well, we're a little bit tight on money right now, and so we're going to spend less money per square foot to maintain our campus and allow our facility condition index to slide up. And we need to be able to track that over time. And again, with the FPI, we can keep track of those things. So overall, we need to have our baseline measurements and targets. We're going to use the FPI data to identify our initial campus baseline. We might identify peers or people who are performing better than we are and maybe use them as targets. But we will set our own targets either based on peers or based on the campus executives or the trustees and what they're expecting us to do and how they want us to perform. Here's an example of a university that I provided some assistance to. Actually, it's a small college, and you can tell because here the number of students is less than 1,000. And they have been using the FPI since 2006. And their number of students was a little bit less than 900. It peaked near 1,000, And then they saw a significant drop off here between 2012 and 2015. And if you think back to the cost per student, where this at this small institution, the students were paying a lot of money when there weren't very many of them on campus. So here in 2015, there are not many people on campus. The cost to maintain the campus hasn't changed significantly. Here it is, AFOE per gross square foot. They weren't really growing much, but the cost for the students to be at the facility was over $5,000. That just doesn't make sense. And so they had to make some strategic decisions, and they looked at their annual facility operating expenditures. They were pushing that down. They made some adjustments, and they were able to improve the student number of students on campus. Students got more attracted to the campus, and maybe they addressed some strategic problems that way to satisfy the campus overall. So overall, to move toward your targets, you have to develop something like a RACI chart. And if you're not familiar with it, RACI stands for responsible, so knowing who the responsible individual it is. Approve, there has to be someone involved in the process who will approve what strategic actions are made. There's different contributors that contribute to the data and help you understand what's going on. And then you may be informing another set of people. Sometimes it's a university senate or some other group of people that you keep them informed of all of this data that you have. So you need to know who is responsible for setting the targets, what will be done to achieve the target, how will you progress to the target and measure your progress, know when your target will be achieved and know that you're going to get there when you're supposed to, and lastly, know where your data will come from to measure your progress toward achieving your targets. The FPI is a great tool to move from straight, simple, peer comparisons to where you're doing continuous improvement for your organization and meeting the needs well beyond what has been done previously by many facility organizations. So you may want to know what's next. What do I do? Well, this is when we're going to start answering some questions and hopefully solving some of your problems. If you haven't been typing in questions in the chat box for Billy, why we can utilize the raise hand feature, and you can let us know that you want to ask a question, and Billy will turn your microphone on.
Ed, we haven't received any new questions in the chat box, but maybe people will unmute themselves. You can, or Billy, you can do that as well if you don't want to utilize the chat box.
Or alternatively, maybe Christina could show you some of the interactive features associated with the FPI and the new tools that she has been busily developing over the last, it's probably a year and a half or 2 years now. So I'll stop sharing and I'll let you take over, Christina. How's that?
Sure. So for any of you that would you have any questions, feel free to send those in the chat box, and Ted or Billy, you can look for the questions. So Ted, I don't know if you want to talk through some of this. This was one of the slides that Ted featured in the slide deck. So what's interesting about this is the flexibility with this filtering tool. So if I were to select only research high, research very high, you would see how this dynamic changes. And the other nice, oh, and I apologize, I'm not sharing my screen yet.
Well, Christina, while you get started, we have a quick question, so I'll give you a time
I was
to get
so
there.
busy.
We
I
have
was so busy getting ready to show all of you this great feature that I just split the screen and ran. So here we are. Sorry. All of you should now see my screen, correct?
Yes, we do.
Very good. Okay, so Billy, go ahead and ask the question if you like.
Okay, I need to get back to my chat box here. It says we're a small private secondary school with about 2 million gross square feet. Is the data in the FPI report relevant to our school?
Let me try answering that. There are a few private small secondary school, some of them are probably K-12, that would match your cohort. However, that's for simple peer comparisons. And I continue to argue that if you're trying to demonstrate that you're doing a good job, regardless of whether you have peers in the FPI, you should be entering information in the FPI and then demonstrating how you are getting better, either getting better by measures that you think are used to get better, or getting better based on measures your boss says you need to achieve. So if it's in expenditures per gross square foot and your boss wants to see those go down, then you can measure that with the FPI. Start with 2 years worth of data and then you're really good to go. Or if your boss wants to see customer satisfaction, again, use the FPI. So it's a great tool for that, regardless of whether you have very many peers in the FPI database.
So I am back on the slide. I think all of you are with me now, so I apologize for that. What I wanted to show is the flexibility of the filtering options, and we're only filtering by Carnegie classification for this session. But for those of you who will be participating in this new version of FPI, so both the survey and the report are new, which is why it's taken a while to get the survey out. But like I mentioned in the chat box, it'll be open before Thanksgiving, and we'll keep it open much longer this year because of the delay. You'll find that the survey is much easier to navigate, much more intuitive than what we've had in the past, and the report is as well. So this is one of the visualizations or dashboards that we've created. We can create really an unlimited number of these. So for participants, you will have more options to sort than Carnegie. You will be able to sort on the institution name. And as you see here, the institution name has been removed from this view because of the session today that we have. But for people who participate, all of you who've been with us for some time participating, you understand that's one of the great benefits of participating in this annual survey and report. You do get to see the names of the other participating institutions. So for this example, the institution name would be highlighted. This is one particular institution that I'm hovering over. It's a Research High Carnegie classification. And I apologize if it's a little hard to read. It's not bolded in this view, but the GSF maintained is just over 4 million, and the FCI index is 13%, and the AFOE per GSF is $4.65. The other filter option that you'll have in the actual report as a participant is region, and there may be a couple of others. So APPA region, Carnegie classification, we'll have a number of these filtering options. It can get very interesting when you have the ability to sort and look through the data. I'll add masters to this. And once again, you can easily see with a click here how much this changes, how dynamic this is. So Ted, I'll stop there. I don't know if you have any further comments or direction for me on this slide before I bring up another slide. or if
Well,
anybody has
well,
any questions.
since we have a question that came from a small private secondary school, what does K-12 look like? Do you have any data?
We may. This is dependent on someone participating. So we did have a
Okay,
few
and
elements of
they
data.
they
Now, I
seem to
will say
be
a
they
lot of
seem
the
to
case,
be in pretty good shape too,
well,
with
and a lot of
FCIs less than 10%. That's pretty good.
now I will say that for a lot of the K through 12 schools who participate, they participate at the district level. So some of these are district schools, not all of them, but I would say the majority of them are.
So for the questioner, uh, there's some relevancy because it looks like there's about 10 or so data points available.
Yep. And this is the other thing that, for those of you who've participated in the survey, now with this new tool on for both the survey side, Qualtrics, and this side, which is powered by Tableau, we will now be reevaluating what the minimal requirements will be for participation because the real advantage to this tool is ensuring that everyone participates equally in order to get the most benefit out of these visualizations. There were a number of institutions who didn't provide data in various scenarios, and of course, we removed those. And so it limits the ability to get that increased sample size by Carnegie or APPA region, whatever you're looking at.
Christina, because there's always a continuing interest in utilities, because the utility bill has to be paid, have you got example graph of utilities per gross square foot available?
Well, I do, but this is the purchase utilities per GSF, but this is not uh, dynamic. It's
Oh,
just a simple display.
okay.
So I do
Well,
have,
which other ones are dynamic?
okay,
Oh,
this
okay.
one,
So
this,
what's the cost per student? And again, let's look at some of those research institutions and see how expensive they are for students.
so here's,
And interestingly, there's a very wide range, but it seems to be hovering in around $2,000 or less per student attendee, almost regardless of the size of the institution. But as you get to have more students on campus, the cost per student goes down.
yes. Ted, there are a couple of people put a chat in the box and I didn't review it. I was wondering if you would, I'll just make a comment while you're looking that up, Ted. The other nice thing about this, and again, for those of you who've been participating with us for quite a while here, watch what happens when I exclude these potential outliers. I'm not going to say that they're incorrect, but they are skewing in some way the display. So now look what happened. When I remove just two potential outliers, we have a different view of the data now, and so the spread is much more dispersed. So this is a new feature. I know some of you are used to us doing a lot of the data scrubbing on the back end, which creates a delay with issuing the report. But now with this new ability to quickly and easily spot the anomalies or the data outliers, all of you will have a much more active role in this because it's much easier for all of us to view the data, and we'll have a process for you to verify whether this is correct or not. And if it's correct, it needs to be noted. And if you choose to exclude it because it's not relevant to you, you can do that. So I wanted to make that important point. So sorry, Ted, go ahead. I don't know if we have a couple
Uh,
questions.
so we've got another question suggesting to select some metrics that induce a healthy tension. For example, facility condition index and maintenance reinvestment rate both have current replacement value in the denominator. This encourages a middle ground and less cherry picking of data. And, and I completely agree. You do not want to be in a situation where data that you're using to justify your reason for being is based solely on data that you can control.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
do a whole lot better if you can get folks on your campus to recognize that they're measuring you based on data that they're in charge of, and you're performing or you're achieving targets that they've set based on their data measurements. And the FPI gives you many of those opportunities. Now, in cases where the FPI doesn't, obviously you're going to have to develop some of your own metrics. But I agree uh, that tying uh, your performance measures to things that you're not in control of, it makes your work a lot more valid.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, one more thing, when we prepared for this presentation, we created these visualizations uniquely for this presentation. So for those of you who've participated in the previous survey cycle, that data is available in unique dashboards or visualizations outside of this presentation. So I'm not able to show those in this session because they are not anonymized, but they are available for all the participants. And part of what I will be doing is ensuring that the same visualizations are available uh, at a minimum for everyone, whether you're a participant or not a participant. And if you're not a participant, you will not have access to the institution. You'll just have larger groupings such as what you see here. But beyond that, we do have an opportunity to always create new visualizations. Um, and I will be soliciting that feedback from all of the participants going forward. So I think, Ted, I can look at customer satisfaction if people want to view that I do have available
Yeah,
here. We
definitely.
just
Go ahead.
we just had like I said, I have dashboards prepared for the participants, but the institution names are included.
Okay, so again, here there's a wide range between extremely satisfied and at less than $2 a square foot versus one at $7 a square foot. So at least in one campus, it's possible without spending very much money to have your customers extremely satisfied. Um, there's a number of ways to get to that high customer satisfaction. Some folks will do it by um, performing uh, preventive maintenance activities religiously and making sure everything is ready at the beginning of the day so that the educational mission can be delivered. Others will take the attitude, if you pick up the phone and call us, we will respond to your request within 24 hours or maybe within 8 hours, and we will solve your problem within 24 hours. Uh, there's advantages and disadvantages to that. In one case, you're committing a certain amount of your resources every day to make sure everything is operating the right way. Alternatively, you're committing maybe an even larger fraction of your resources to be running around all the time based on what your clients want. Regardless of what uh, you're really trying to do, if that gets your customer satisfaction level up, maybe that's where your organization wants you to go. But again, you can see here, spending a lot of money, $12 a square foot, and having dissatisfied customers clearly is a problem. When someone can be spending, let's see, there's a red dot there, a little over maybe 450 a square foot, and they're extremely satisfied. So as Christina is saying, if you're participating in the survey and then you have access to who these folks are, you can pick up the phone and say, hey, what are you doing? How do I, what targets did you set? What method did you use to move from wherever you were to extremely satisfied for only $4.50 a square foot? That's quite a feat.
And I think it's interesting, Ted, just looking at just the Carnegie classifications, but the shift in the cost. So if I shift this back, the cost structures, it's a little more dispersed. Maybe we had more participation in those two Carnegie classifications, but it shifted a little bit to the higher cost side of it. So it's just interesting how, depending on the depending on the selection, the distribution changes. And what we didn't do in this session is include additional filtering options. So I think that's where you could really get some unique information and really drill down with additional filters, which we do have on the participant level dashboards.
Right. So there was a question asked earlier on that I missed. So this individual is fairly new to position, was notified that they'll be responsible for entering the data into the FPI.
Yeah,
Nice
I
to know you're
already reached
keeping.
out to I already reached out to the individual with the information on the FPI survey, but and sent out my email address.
Right. So let me encourage you also, when you're new to the position, there's something very important that you need to do, and I've helped some clients do this in a consulting role, and that is to create what I call the circuit diagram that connects the FPI question, all 136 of them, to where the information is really coming from at your university. You're going to get to know a lot of folks at your university. There'll be several folks in the accounting area, some in HR, some in institutional research, and they all have some piece of data that you want to get. Once you get that, find out how to make an automatic connection through your CMMS or some other method, so that when the survey comes out every year, it's a quick, maybe set of phone calls in the worst case, or emails. But you say, okay, I'm gathering this information now. I need it for fiscal year 2020, and please get it to me by the end of the week. That's the hard way of doing it. The easy way is to have it all done automatically in the CMMS, and some CMMS vendors will help you gather that information and maintain it for you for automatic reporting to the FPI. And then you just do what I call pushing the easy button, because everything is gathered automatically. You have it all systematized. The FPI is a big system, and you should have a good system to populate the FPI rather than try to create a new plan every year when the survey comes out. And when you do that, one of the things that you end up doing automatically is you ensure the integrity of your data. And that's one of the most important things. You have reliable data because it comes from the correct location at your college or university, and it's reliable data because in many cases it's the same data that gets reported to the federal government or to a state higher ed board or somebody else. And as long as you know where the true information is held, gather it for your FPI, and it's makes your life a lot easier.
Yep. Does anybody have any other questions? We may end early, Ted.
All right, well,
Well, there's another question.
is there much overlap with iPads? There's a little bit of overlap, and part of the challenge that you have with iPads data, um, it's not gathered every year. I think for most iPads data, it's every other year. Uh, Once you know who is submitting the data to iPads, put them on your list of people who will give you the data for the FPI. You can also use things like there may be an institutional research page that will have a lot of the data that you need, but some of the data is truly only in the facilities organization and may not be reported to iPads.
Yes, and Mark, we could speak about this offline if you like. Ted is correct. We are also trying to pull in other sources of data where it makes sense to do so with FPI data. It has to align and make sense to do that. And we have other data sources, some internal to APPA, and iPads is another data source that we are thinking about looking at and wondering if there are some visualizations that we can build off of that. So if you have ideas, I'd love to hear them. Currently, we're only using iPads in a limited way at the moment with FPI, particularly in the registration section. So we do auto-populate the Carnegie, the funding. Uh, let's see what else. I think that's about it. I don't know that we're doing any other type of validation against iPads.
Don't you do student populations?
That is still self-reported.
Okay.
We do ask the participant to give us the student enrollment range as well as the FTE headcount total as of the fall of whatever the fiscal year is that we're in. Okay, we did get another question, Ted.
Well, it's not showing up for
Nope,
me yet.
maybe not. I thought we did. It was flashing. Very good. I I don't know, if I don't know if we have a mix of people on the call today who've participated. I'm guessing a number of you are longer term participants with FPI. I know we have at least one person who's new to this. I did send out my email address in the chat box earlier, chills@appa.org. So if any of you wish to reach out to me, I am happy to offer you a one-on-one Zoom or GoToMeeting. I have all this stuff. So I can offer you a one-on-one session where we can walk through the new dashboards or visualizations that the participants will see. I'm also very happy to include any of you on the new survey, which is on the Qualtrics platform. So I do have some people from the membership who volunteer to be beta testers, and they're helping me with that. But if any of you are, again, longtime participants and you'd like to get a look at this, even if you're not a beta tester, if you just want to look at what we're doing, I'm happy to share that with you. We are working on some back-end functionality with this survey, and that's why there's a little bit of a hold up now. We need to ensure that we still have the survey administrator who will be in control of this survey link. We're not just going to send this out to anyone at the institution for obvious reasons. For those of you who participated in the past, there is a process that works here that we feel strongly we need to maintain. And so we are building a contact list of all of the previous survey administrators, and we will send that link out to the survey administrators. I'm hoping this week, it may be early next week. And then you will be able to reach out to me if that needs to be changed, or you can designate someone else to receive that survey link. So we're working on that piece right now, but the survey has been built and is really ready to go. So it's exciting.
Okay, well, we seem to have gotten to 1 full hour, ending a little bit early. Unless there's no more questions, Billy, do you need to do any wrap up?
I do. I want to thank both Christina and Ted for taking time out of their schedules to do this for us. And I'd like to thank the participants for taking time out of your schedule to be here today. So I want to wish everybody a happy holiday season. Be safe, stay healthy. Until next time. Bye-bye now.
Hi,
Thanks,
thank you.
Billy.